The last letter of the Hebrew letters is a TAV. And fittingly, it is described as the shape of a seal or a stamp, as would be befitting the last letter of the Hebrew letters. And also its meaning is a code or a note, a stamp or an impression. The sages tell us that God's stamp is emet, truth. The aleph is the first letter of the alphabet. The mem is called the middle, and the tav is the last letter. In other words, God's seal is His truth and His providence and His presence in every point of reality. The last letter of the first word of the Torah is a tav, bereshit, and the first three words, their last letters, spell out emet, truth. So we see at the very beginning of creation is God's impression of truth. And when we get to the seventh day of creation, Shabbat, the last three words, bara Elokim la'asot, that God made to do, spell out emet. So from the beginning of creation is God's stamp of emet, ending with the letter tav, and the end of the creation itself of Shabbat ends la'asot, to do. In other letters, we have learned over and over again about the importance of rectification as the task of a Jew in this world. And here we see that the tav represents God's point of truth and the impression left on the soul as it comes into the body in order to reveal God's truth in the world. The letter tav is actually made up of two letters, a daled and a nun. These letters spell out Dan, one of the 12 tribes. Interestingly enough, Dan was the last of the tribes to march in the desert, and his task was to pick up lost articles. Just like the letter Tav is the last letter of the alphabet, Dan, the two letters that make up the Tav, they were the last to march, and they were cleaning up things that everyone had left behind, the impression of that which is left behind. Now, the idea of impression and stamp exists at every level of reality. In the world, we see fossils as an example of how previous historical eras are stamped into the physical reality around us. On the level of souls, we see the concept of reincarnation, how previous lifetimes are impressed and stamped into our life right now. And on the level of divinity, we see God's impression, as it were, God's fingerprints or fossils in every point of reality. Dan also spells out judgment. And judgment also exists on every level of reality. This world is full of judgments. When we leave this world, we're told that every soul is judged. And this is very connected to the word for death itself, which is met or mavet, ending with the letter tav, because that is the end. But an end that is really a beginning. The soul is judged, and then through reincarnation is given another chance. And on the level of divinity, we're told that the two forces that permeate all reality, represented by God's four-letter name and by the name Elokim, is chesed and gevura, loving kindness and judgment, strength. So God's judgment, not in a negative way, but the laws of nature and the orderly working of the universe is an expression of God's strength and discipline and law and order. The letter TAV equals 400. And we're told that in the world to come, after we leave this world, after we go through Mavet, or we die, Met, ending with a TAV, there are 400 worlds of divine pleasure waiting for us. And these 400 worlds of divine pleasure relate to Abraham buying the burial place for Sarah for 400 pieces of silver. This is a very symbolic purchase, because with the purchase of this burial place for Sarah, in a sense, Abraham is taking possession of all of the land of Israel, which is described by our sages as being 400 parsang by 400 parsang. The letter TAV can be meditated upon as being the end, how every ending leads to a new beginning, how every cycle will repeat itself, and how God's impression and truth is stamped in every point of reality, including our minds, our souls, and our heart.